Welcome, folks. I've been promising this one for quite a while, and I've been sitting on the data for quite a while, and I'm finally getting around to putting it into a video. I hope this proves useful, so let's get started. So before we get started, I would like to make a quick pause and make an apology for the ads that are showing up. It was never my intention to monetize this channel. This is purely intended to be an informational channel, and I don't know how the ads got turned on, and I can't figure out how to turn them off. So I really apologize for interrupting the videos with the annoying ads. I just found that out recently. So anyway, sorry. Soon after the Diamond Trainers were released, people started landing elite fielders. I got one. I think it was my first Diamond Trainer. And ever since then, people have been wondering, are they useful? And at the same time, the prior power ranked tournament was playing out, and we were starting to see the effects of laser beam on position players. And so there was a lot of curiosity between how these two types of things affected your team performance, or at minimum your team stats. So I set about trying to gather data on this. So what I did is I established a baseline lineup that I kept static for all the tests, and I used the OVR analysis room, and I gathered data across 10 seasons for various scenarios and compared them against each other, because we cannot test against power ranked. There's just too many variables in play. But what we can do and we can control is what's at play when we're doing OVR analysis. So this allowed me to tweak very specific things, gather some data, and compare against each other. So in doing so, I wanted to figure out if laser beam on a catcher does actually improve pitcher performance. There was some question back at the time that I did this, whether or not that was true, a true statement. I initially doubted it. I also wanted to know, well, if that's true, then theoretically shouldn't the key position players, such as center field, possibly shortstop and second base, shouldn't they also be able to affect things? So I wanted to test that. I only ended up testing center field because I found results very quickly. I didn't even complete those tests. So anyways, you'll see that in a moment. I wanted to know if elite fielder diamond trainers on the DH impacted things, or if it had to be on actual position player. So non-pitching, non-playing, non-fielding positions versus actual fielders. And also, when we compare laser beam versus 5-tool and just generally boosting your fielding, is that sufficient? Can you simply boost your fielding via 5-tool or training, and will that compare to laser beam? What is our sacrifice in offense when we switch out to an elite fielder? How much offense do we lose? And then also, does how much do elite fielders affect pitcher performance? Anyways, these are all the goals that I set about, and I got some good answers for these, a lot of these, so I'd like to share those now. I've actually already alluded to this earlier, but I want to walk through what essentially are the parameters for running everything here. So I already mentioned I used a consistent set of players and skill sets. None of that changed over the course of these tests. The elite fielder trainers did not align to the position players, meaning if the elite fielder had hitting bonuses for a first baseman, I didn't use it on a first baseman, and therefore there were no offensive bonuses also along with the elite fielders. This essentially meant that I was isolating elite fielding from everything else, and such that when I replaced it with an offensive trainer, I was essentially comparing an offensive trainer versus nothing. So that's important to understand. Also, when I did remove it, I was replacing with a gold offensive trainer because I have had no luck in landing diamond offensive trainers. Everything's in pitching. I have a full out pitching staff of all diamond trainers and lots of gaps in my hitting. And finally, I mentioned I used the OVR analysis. I averaged over 10 seasons so to hopefully minimize anomalies and odd seasons. And in cases, there were a couple cases where the results were becoming very evident very quickly, and I didn't even bother finishing out the 10 seasons. And in two cases, I ran with only 6 seasons. Okay, so then once again, I averaged all the results across those 10 seasons, and they were all okay. And once again, we cannot predict against power rankings, so this is all relative to your own team's performance and seeing how much of improvement in your own team against a standard opponent would be, or standard set of opponents, not with power ranked skills. So but what we'll see is at least that in terms of laser beam, it still was representative and did give us a good idea. So you'll have to make that final step in translation of whether or not the extent to which it helps you or doesn't help you can translate into ranked. So let's move on. So here's a quick snapshot of the summarized data that I'm going to be going over in the next few slides. If you want to just pause here and take a look at this and make your own analysis or screenshot this or whatever, or if you want to take a look at the spreadsheet, I'll put a link to that in the video description so you can actually look over the actual data season by season and see how it got averaged together. The one thing I'll call out here is the yellow highlight. I decided to start recording team OPS overall on the 10th season of the first run. So the top line of this, the offensive trainer line, is essentially the baseline set. It is no elite fielding in play, and just standard set of gold trainers. And this we can kind of compare a lot of different things against. And for that matter, the top four of those are now line one and line four. The three elite fielders and the offensive trainers kind of give you the ones to compare against later, because you'll notice a lot of the tests are 0 elite fielders or 3 elite fielders for the rest of them. So that gives you some way to look at this and analyze the data, but I'll show you what I found here next. So the first thing that jumps out is that having laser beam on your catcher absolutely does improve both your pitching ERA and walks and hits per innings pitched. Both of those dropped effectively. In fact, the change from with no offensive trainers in the introduction of laser beam and 5-tool compared to with 3 elite fielders to 3 elite fielders with laser beam and 5-tool was the same, essentially the same. In fact, so that was a .2 ERA drop. Okay, I already mentioned that. So the next thing to note is when I added laser beam onto a center fielder, I saw no improvement. So that would be comparing line, where is it? The final right, the bottom line of the red box to the second line of the red box. You can see that essentially the ERA stayed the same. There was very little impact to walks, hits, inning pitched, and the runs against also essentially the same. So no noticeable improvement by having laser beam on the center fielder. The next thing, 5-tool when compared using 5-tool only as compared to using laser beam, yes, 5-tool did improve, or boosting fielding did improve pitcher performance to not to the extent that using laser beam did. In fact, roughly 1/3 as effective as using laser beam. So it's not really a viable counter strategy to not having laser beam is to jack your fielding. It'll help some, but not to the same extent. Okay, so moving on from there. The results that I found with using elite fielders was at least somewhat consistent in that with the addition of each additional elite fielder, it similarly affected my ERA and my whip for my pitchers progressively. So essentially that what that amounted to is we saw a whip drop in general of .02 per additional elite fielder, and ERA generally dropped, but there was one anomalous season up at the top there of when I went from 0 offensive trainers to and replacing those with 1 elite fielder. Everything else thereafter was fairly consistent. So I'm going to call that an anomaly and say that in general we saw a .1 ERA drop for each additional elite fielder. Now, another interesting thing to note is the effect of additional elite fielders when used with a catcher with laser beam had less impact than when I wasn't using laser beam on my catcher. And then finally, I've heard a lot of people make claims about this, some of them wrong, and some just questioning what the case is. Can you use elite fielders on your bench players or non-fielding players to jack your defense and improve your pitching? And the answer is no. No impact there. So let's stop that myth. And now we have an answer to that question. Okay, so let's move on to what the offensive impact was. So as I mentioned earlier, essentially by adding a gold offensive trainer and replacing the diamond trainer, diamond elite fielder, because the elite fielder was offering no offensive bonuses, essentially was measuring the effect of a gold offensive trainer, but also the cost of which if you weren't replacing it with any hitting bonuses on your elite fielding diamond trainer. Anyways, so what I found that if I averaged together the impact across the three different players that I used in my set, I found that overall, by adding a diamond trainer in, I saw an average increase of 0.02 and an OPS increase of 0.07. In other words, removing an offensive trainer, uh, removing him sacrifices 0.02 average and 0.07 offense OPS. But so let's actually do a little bit of comparisons there and see what the costs are in actual numbers. So restating what we said on the last slide, we are essentially saying that for each elite fielding trainer that you use, you'll see your ERA improve by 0.1. So for example, you drop from a 3.0 ERA down to a 2.9. That's averaged across all the pitchers, by the way, obviously. And also you'd see a whip drop as well from, for example, 0.5 down to 1.48, 1.5 down to 1.48. And the cost of which would be, to see that improvement, the cost of which would be your overall team average would drop from 300 down to 280, for an example, or your OPS would drop from 1 down to 0.93. So you can draw your own conclusions there, but my initial take is not really worth it. So if we take a look at all of these things together and an overall summary of general advice and findings for the whole thing, we can deduce that laser beam is essential for your catcher. This has been proven now 2 tournaments in a row by top teams using laser beam on their catchers that it works. So there's not a big surprise there. I just basically confirmed it with the data. 5 tool does provide additional benefit to pitching if used on a catcher, but it is not essential. So if you only land laser beam on your catcher, don't blow all your blue tickets trying to land 5 tool. If you get it while you're trying to get your second good skill on there, then so be it. Keep it. But if you land another good offensive skill, hey, take that. Okay, laser beam on other fielders is not worth investing in, as near as I can tell from the data. Certainly didn't work for center field, and I highly doubt it would work for shortstop and second base. I was so turned off by the results with center field, I didn't even bother trying with the others. Not to mention, I would have had to reskill things, and that didn't kind of land in my lap. So, elite fielding improvements do not seem to outweigh the costs. As I just mentioned, the last one, Personally, I think that the offensive hit by adding the elite fielders in is too great, and I would favor using other types of trainers because the offensive gain that I've seen by using some offensive diamond trainers has been significant. So I would not use an elite fielder unless I don't have a good trainer for that position player and the diamond trainer for elite fielding matched that position player. That's the only case I would use it. I will not use an elite fielder for a non-matching position anymore. It just doesn't seem to work. So that's a summary of all my findings. I hope the data has proved useful. Welcome any feedback. Once again, likes and subscribes, and I really welcome comments because it helps with the search algorithm on YouTube. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.